so pleased to have Kim Rizk with us again today, one of the founding owners of Jam and Crepe. She's also a master food preserver and just all around amazing person. So we are pleased to have her here today to share with us about what we can do with our winter squash for the holidays and beyond.
Thanks, Marianne. So awesome. Awesome to be here, and so great to see so many people really interested in winter squash. It's one of our favorite things this time of year, because we love to really keep our cooking in sync with the seasons at Jam and Crepes, and the local harvest of winter squash is really at its peak right now. What's great is that you can find really good locally grown and harvested winter squash in all the markets and all the farmers markets, and it's pretty inexpensive too. And we were talking about it really doubles nicely as a nice table decoration because of its nice thick skin, and that's what's different from the winter squash, versus zucchini, kind of summer squash, patty pound squash, and things like that. Their cousins is that they do have a very kind of thick, hard outer shell, which keeps the inside flesh and moisture really nice for a good long period of time. So you can get inspired and go to the farmer's market and buy some pretty varieties and not feel pressured to, have to cook it in the next couple of days the way you do with a lot of other perishable produce. They are, as I was saying, very inexpensive, source of food, and so incredibly versatile. One of the things that I like to talk about is that because they are such good keepers with that hard skin, they can be a little intimidating, right? Because you're kind of like, oh, how do I manage this? And I see at a lot of the supermarkets and things, they have like pre-cut squash, I think, just for that reason. And that's fine. But I think once you learn to handle it, you won't be really as intimidated. So I'm going to show you some of those techniques today. The tools are always really important. So you want to make sure that you've got a really nice, heavy, weighted, sharp chef's blade. Okay, don't try to attack the winter squash with a small knife. Okay, you need to have something that's good and heavy. And then the other tool that you're going to want is a cutting board, and you want to make sure that you stabilize this cutting board. One of the tricks to stabilizing a cutting board on your work surface, like I have a stainless steel countertop here, maybe at home you have marble or wood or whatever, but something that might be kind of slip around a little bit. So a wet dish towel popped right underneath your cutting board is going to help make that nice and secure, okay, so that when you're going at your squash. Now, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage here because I'm in my island table here in the kitchen, and it's taller, this table. Ideally, you want to be working at a level that gives you, so you've got some good kind of weight that you can really kind of push into when you're cutting your squash. But here's some really good news. Some of the squash, or most of them, the winter squash, they're really hard. And if you find that you feel really uncomfortable, here's another trick to stabilization too. You want to be working on flat surfaces. So take my little Lancaster Co-op sticker. Take a sharp vegetable peeler and create a flat surface, okay? Create that flat surface so when you put that squash down, right, it's not rolling around. If I tried to put it down like this, it's a little unstable. So create a nice flat surface to yourself, okay? And the next thing is just pop the whole thing in the oven. A 350 oven for 10 minutes is going to soften that outer shell so that when you go to cut it, you don't have to work as hard, okay? It's a miracle, believe me. You don't have to, you really don't have to fight with it. I'm going to actually pop. Um, you know what? I'm going to back up. We're going to do a little bit of primer here. I want to show you what I have on the table. Okay. So this is one of my favorites. It's a sweet dumpling squash, really a sweet little squash. And they're wonderful, hollowed out and roasted. And they make a great little vessel for a pumpkin soup. We're going to make a nice pumpkin soup tonight. We are also going to stuff these. The flavor of the sweet dumpling squash is really, really nice. So the skin on these they're pretty hard. So and I don't really want to cut down my sides here like I was showing you on the acorn, because I want to have a nice vessel when we use this. So I'm going to pop the whole thing in the oven for 10 minutes at 350. You'll see some people say, oh, you can put it in the microwave. But you know what? The microwave cooks from the inside out. So the oven I find is better. 350 for 10 minutes. All I really want to do, I don't want to cook the squash on the inside. I just want to soften the skin so that I can attack it. Okay, so let's go over some of the other squash here. I bet most of you have had this before. Very, very popular butternut squash, delicious. Again, if you're going to cut it, I was practicing with this. You're going to stabilize it this way. And then, you know what? Throw the whole thing in the oven, just like we did the acorn. 10 minutes, 350. It's going to be a dream to cut. Okay. This is a sugar pumpkin. Delicious. Again, pop the whole thing in the oven for 10 minutes. I did that before we got on because I roasted a whole one for 45 minutes. For our soup. The long, slow roasting on these winter squash make for a really nice, creamy, textured squash puree. So long, slow roasting. This is a cheese pumpkin. This always reminds me of like Cinderella's carriage, right? It's kind of a cool squash. But it's a delicious eating squash too. Again, it's a bear. This is a big squash. So you're going to put that whole thing in the oven for 10, maybe 15, 20 minutes to get this shell softened up a little bit before you kind of attack it with your big knife. Okay. And again, make sure you've got a good knife and you've got your squash sitting, not, rolling around. You want nice flat surfaces. Let's see. This is another one of my favorites. This one is super different. It's a spaghetti squash. I'm sure many of you have had it before. It really is nice. My favorite way to do spaghetti squash is just cut it right in half, turn it upside down on a sheet pan, roast it in the oven, 350 for about 30 minutes, just until it's fork tender. And then you'll see, I have one I've done, I'll show you the strands. They'll come out really nicely. You can microwave it as well. If you're going to microwave it, you're going to put it in a dish of shallow water, a couple inches of water, cover it with plastic wrap and microwave it like 7 to 10 minutes, just until it's fork tender. Actually, with the spaghetti squash, unlike the other dense flesh winter squashes, you really don't want to overcook this because what's nice about it are all the kind of nice crunchy strands. So let's see what else. Acorn. You're probably most of you familiar with acorn. A nice, dense, hearty winter squash. Roasts well, makes a nice puree too. And then this is another one of our favorites, delicata. And it has that name because the outer skin on this one is actually tender enough when it's roasted to eat. So it's a delicious edible skinned winter squash. So we like that one a lot. As a matter of fact, I'm going to wash it and I'm going to cut it and we're going to roast it in the oven. And I'll show you a nice little dish that we can use for the holidays that I think you'll like. Be right back. Okay, so the delicata, I am going to do exactly what I told you before, which is just get a little bit of the surface on the delicata is not, or the skin is not as thick and hard as the others because it is edible, but it is something that you have to be careful with any kind of vegetable that you're cutting. And again, I hate the fact that I'm up on this tall surface. But we're going to do this. We're going to slice it right in half. Okay. This is the inside of the delicata. Okay. And another tool that's really nice for scraping out the seeds and the pulp in the winter squash is actually a melon baller. You can use a spoon, and that's fine, but the melon baller actually has a sharp edge. So it helps kind of pull out the insides. It gets rid of that. Can you guys see that? I'm just going to do this and pull out the seeds. And you can experiment with, you know, washing and drying and toasting your squash seeds. Some are better than others. These are nice little ones, and they are quite edible. I love them just washed, dried, and then roasted in the oven with a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper. It can be good. So, all right. So here's the delicata, and then because this whole thing is edible, I'm going to put this cut side down on the cutting board, and we're going to cut just about 1/4 inch thick crescents. And I love to sometimes, and this is so pretty, I don't know if you can see the skin there. When it's roasted, it's really good. And we're just going to do with olive oil, salt, and pepper in the oven. It's really good cut even in smaller pieces, like into little crouton sizes. And if you roast them, they get nice and brown and toasty. Throw them in salads. You get like little winter squash croutons in your salad. It's a good thing to do. Okay, so here we go. Actually, hold on 1 second. I'm going to check. I think it's been about 10 minutes, and I'm going to take that sweet dumpling out of the oven. See what's going on there. So here we go. Now, if you do that, you might want to just let it cool a little bit before you attack it. It's a little hot, so we'll do that. Okay, so I'm going to get a bowl and just put our crescent wedges, the sweet dumpling squash in here. And we're going to add just a little splash of olive oil. Okay. And a little salt and pepper. And if you like something else, some other spices on there too, depends on how you're serving this, but a little bit of cumin would be nice on that. We're going to do it this way. We're going to do kind of fresh herbs afterwards as well. So now I'm just going to toss this. This is probably one of the easiest winter squash things to make. I'm bumping my oven up to 425 on this because I want to get some really nice color on this squash. And again, it's not the long, slow roasting we're doing with this. We have it cut up in small pieces, and we want to get some nice color. Okay, get that on the sheet pan, just kind of in a single layer, and we're going to put it right now. Hello. I don't want table space in here. Okay. Hold on. I forgot I put a second sweet dumpling in the oven again. There we go. Okay, so we have our delicata cooking. It's going to get kind of a nice roasty brown color. And while that's happening, I'm going to show you, that's right, I want to show you the spaghetti squash that I roasted just before we kind of jumped online. So I cut it in half and scraped it out with the melon baller, the seeds and the pulp, put it upside down. I didn't do any kind of oil or anything. I just put it on parchment. And then the way to check the spaghetti squash is ready, and this took about 30 minutes, is just use a fork to see that you don't need it to be too soft, and you don't want to overcook the spaghetti squash. So you'll see what happens. We've got a little color on there, and then we're going to use our tines fork to just scrape out all these nice spaghetti-like strands. And it has some real nice crunchy texture, which is good. Okay, so we're going to put that in the bowl. We're actually not going to do any complete a recipe of spaghetti squash. I just wanted you to know how to do it. And I love to serve it just like I do spaghetti sometimes. I have like a really nice tomato, eggplant, caper sauce to put on top, or a nice mushroom sauce is also delicious with the spaghetti squash. It also makes a great addition to chicken soup. Just kind of stir it in at the end. So you have these kind of strands, nice kind of feathery strands of squash in there. So that's a spaghetti squash. And you can really have some fun with it. It's really cooks very quickly. It's an easy one, and it's really yummy. That mushroom sauce that I do is really nice. Secondly, just sauteed mushrooms and a little bit of olive oil with fresh herbs, and then a little Parmesan cheese with the spaghetti squash. It's really good.
So Kim, if you could just, I guess, give us a quick summary of the I guess, a recipe for the spaghetti squash. So you cut it in half.
Cut it in half. Scrape out the seeds and the pulp. Place it cut side down on a parchment lined baking sheet. It goes in the oven for 350 for 25 to 30 minutes. And you know what? The time frame is going to be different based upon the size of the squash, guys, right? Because these are actually fairly small size spaghetti squash. Sometimes you get them twice the size. So just until you can take a fork and kind of pierce the skin. You don't want it to be super soft, but you just kind of want to be able to pierce the skin. Okay. And then the other thing is, it's okay to undercook it a little bit. Like if you undercook the spaghetti squash, you're not going to get as many of the strands coming out. Like, let me show you. You see how I was able to scrape down and get almost everything out of that shell? You see there's not much left in there. If it was cooked less, this is the other half, which is a little bit larger. I may have cooked this one a little less too. So this flesh is not going to come apart into those strands if it's undercooked, okay? Which is fine. It's better to undercook it because then you could just throw it back in the oven for a few more minutes. This is coming out really nicely in here. We've got some good texture, really good stuff. But then I've got some in here that I might say, I'd like to get some more out of that. I don't want to waste that. So I could just pop that right back in the oven and cook it a little bit longer. But again, better to undercook it, throw it back in, right? Because you can always just kind of, heat this up again too, depending on what you're using it for. You might be throwing in soup or putting a sauce on top. So any other questions about spaghetti squash?
No, I think somebody just was commenting that it's so hard to cut. I don't know if there's a way to kind of, like, sometimes I'll just stick a a serving fork, you know, like for meat in there just to start it. So I have some place to start it. Is that like unsafe?
Oh, because it's hard to cut?
Yeah.
Okay, so use the same technique, put the whole thing in the oven.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
All right.
Put it in the oven just like this for 10 minutes. That skin is going to get soft and it's not going to be hard to cut.
Thank you.
I promise you. Try it. Okay. Oh, we're going to do, actually, let's take a look at the sweet dumpling that came out of the oven. Okay, so here we go. Just wipe off my knife. Okay, for the sweet dumpling squash, we're going to turn it on its side. Now that it's, I mean, it's almost like it's really not going to be super easy, but it's not going to be super difficult either to just kind of turn it. It's going right in because it's softened from the oven. Holding it tightly, using a good knife, and then smash right down. Okay. Now here's the inside. We're going to use this Melon Baller. To pull out and hollow out the inside of the squash. See, it's coming out. Now you can make your opening as small or as big as you want in these. I'm just going to go first and take all of the seeds and the pulp out. And then what's nice is this melon baller that I'm using has a sharp edge, so I can carve some more away because, and you might not want to do this, like if you just want to roast this upside down with a little bit of butter, olive oil, salt, and pepper in the oven like this until it's super tender, and then turn it over and serve it. You could do that. But I actually am going to fill it for the holiday table with a little bit of my favorite stuffing. So rather than stuffing the bird, we're going to stuff the squash. And I'm going to challenge you to think about, which is what I'm doing this year, taking your favorite, everybody's got, there's like a million different variations on a Thanksgiving stuffing. But usually they have bread, right? Whether it's cornbread, brioche, I don't know. They usually have some kind of bread, sometimes rice or, anyway, I took, we have a favorite family stuffing that has sausage, apples, celery, lots of fresh sage, onions, and cornbread. I think that's probably really, really super traditional American, right? But it's really delicious. What I'm doing this year, and I've made to show you tonight, is substituting a really nice, healthy, quick cooking grain, quinoa, for the cornbread in the stuffing. So it's a quinoa sausage and apple stuffing. And it's really nice. So a technique that I want to tell you about, I'm thinking many of you have tried quinoa before. And most of the time, so there we go. Look, I hollowed out this nice space. It wasn't too difficult to do. And then that's going to go on sheet pan in the oven. Sorry, I'm back. Just upside down like this. You can do a little bit of seasoning in there if you want to. A little butter, rub it with a little butter, salt, pepper. That goes in the oven today. Okay, and since I'm going in here, and I'm not going to worry about that one too much because I baked one previously so I can show you. So we don't have to wait for that to cook. I'm going to show you the delicata. That's ready now. Okay, so I don't know if you can see the color on that. It could get a little bit browner. I might pop it in the oven for another minute. I like it when it gets kind of a nice crispy brown, and you want to make sure that it's roasted well enough that the skins are tender to eat. But what's so nice about them is you get this kind of creamy squash on the inside of the ring, and then you get this nice kind of textured, kind of nutty bite of the skin. I'm going to pop it back in the oven for a second. Okay, so that's cooking.
So if we could just, I guess, summarize, the delicata squash is baked. You slice it, toss it with some seasoning, right? Some olive
oil, salt and pepper.
And then put it in a 425 oven for
425 oven, really just for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
Until it gets
the color that you want. Okay. So it gets the color and texture you want.
Yeah. You want it to brown a little bit. And you want the squash to be soft. But it really doesn't take that long with the hot oven.
All right.
Everybody's oven's a little bit different, but yeah, 15, 20 minutes on the delicata. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's see. Moving on to sugar pumpkin. Okay, so this is the sugar pumpkin that I roasted earlier. It went in for almost an hour. This is, and I did send a recipe. I think there is a recipe for this pumpkin and tomato soup. You could also do different winter squash. That's what's so nice about, most of these are interchangeable. For this recipe, it could be butternut and tomato. This recipe, this soup is really popular at the restaurant. Because it's kind of unusual, right? People think about, really, pumpkin and tomato together? I love the combination. The richness of the roasted pumpkin with the acidity of the tomatoes, and the color is just so wonderful, kind of when you put it together with the fresh herbs. And it's a vegan soup too. There's no dairy in here, and it's rich and delicious and pretty. So it's really popular. It's one of my favorites. So this is what happens to the sugar pumpkin after it's cooked for that long, and you can really almost just, you can see this, peel away the skin, which is so great. And then we're going to just mash this up as the base for our soup along with the tomatoes. Now, this technique for the sugar pumpkin, you can use the same technique for the butternut squash. The pulp then of the roasted pulp of the winter squash is so nice for so many things. Another thing that I love to make at home when I have this is a risotto. So super easy, and I oftentimes do it with barley instead of rice. So I make a pumpkin barley risotto, and that is super delicious. And the ratio for that, if you'd like to know, is 1 cup of pearl barley, 4 cups of vegetable stock, 3/4 of a cup of mashed winter squash puree. And you cook it the way you would a traditional risotto on the stove in a small pan, and add the stock while it's warm a bit at a time until it all kind of absorbs. And then I season it with a little bit of fresh sage and Parmesan cheese. Salt and pepper, delicious. So you should try making that. All right, so I think for our soup recipe, we want about 3 cups of mashed winter squash. And it doesn't have to be mashed too much, because you'll see in the end, I'm going to use an immersion blender for this. Oh, you know what? Hold on 1 second. I'm going to lose the power on my computer. Oh. So the good news is that in the meantime, the delicata squash is ready. I took it out of the oven, okay? It's nice and brown. You see that pretty color? Mm-hmm. How nice that is? Yeah, good stuff. Okay. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. The show must go on. We're here. Okay, so in this bowl now, I'm mashing up the sugar pumpkin that we roasted in the oven. And it's this delicious golden flesh. What are they? What you saying about the sugar pumpkins? Okay.
Oh, which is how to identify a sugar pumpkin. It has to be, it's not just a different kind of.
Oh, okay. So they're just they're like the little pumpkins that you're going to find kind of sold along with the other winter squash. Okay. So we're going to make this great pumpkin and tomato soup I was telling you about. I've got the soup pot here over on the stove. I'm going to get it going. There are just so many delicious aromatics in this that really complement the rich flavor of the squash and the nice kind of acidity of the tomatoes. Put this here. We're going to start with a little olive oil. It's actually a 1/4 cup of olive oil in the soup recipe I'm putting in right now. And I'm going to put in my chopped onion. It's 1 cup actually of chopped red onion that's going in here, the soup pot. And then we have a tablespoon, thank you, Amelia, of garlic. Okay. That was gone. And then the next aromatic that we're putting in here is ginger, fresh ginger root. Yeah, we're going to do the herbs last. I wanted to show this to you though, because I had always struggled with ginger, and my favorite way to do it is on a box grater. So I'm just going to wash this because I even leave the skin on, because in this particular recipe, we're going to use the Immersion Blender. But you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to mince up your ginger. So I use the large holes on the box grater and leave the skin on and everything.
That tip itself is worth being here today.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely.
Flavor. And then sometimes, you know, ginger can be fibrous. So now I'm just going to give it a little rough chop just to kind of make sure I don't have any big strings of ginger in there. But there's my ginger going into the soup pot. And we're going to saute all that deliciousness. And, you know, already it smells like heaven. I was like, oh, the ginger and the garlic and the onion, all those wonderful things. The other ingredients going in here, we're going to use tomatoes. Now, we have tomatoes from our local friends, First Field, fresh tomatoes. We put up our own tomatoes in season as well. Believe it or not, we've already gone through them.
Wow.
We haven't figured out how to put up enough to, you know, but we do have a really good local tomato that we use. Any kind of good plum tomato. And if you like, this is the kind of soup, some people like texture, more texture in soups than others. I like a little texture in this soup, so I oftentimes like to use whole plum tomatoes and then just crush them up a little bit in there. So I've got, like, you know, some texture of the tomatoes in with the squash. So it just depends on what you like. And you can control that with your Immersion blender. I'm going to show you. If you guys don't have one, it's a great tool. I actually brought mine from home because here in the kitchen we have big, massive industrial ones, and I didn't want to frighten you with them. So, because I know you don't have that at all, but you don't need one of those. So I'm just going to kind of get these aromatics going a little more. And then, you know, I think one of the keys to cooking really tasty food, I'm very sensitive to salt. I don't like, you know, overly seasoned food, but it's really important to have enough salt and pepper in things to bring out the flavors. And I find the best way to do that is to layer that in throughout every step. So I'm going to put a little salt and pepper in here with my aromatics. If you wait to season at the end, you've lost it totally. You're going to have to put way too much in there. So we'll get this going.
So there's a question, Kim. Somebody asked if you ever roast
my sinuses.
If you ever roast the onions and garlic before simmering them in the soup.
Roast them?
Yes.
Sure, you could do that. You know, I think, you mean like in the oven?
I'm assuming yes.
Yeah, you could. I mean, again, you're dirtying another pan though. So, yeah. I suppose you could roast them alongside your squash if you wanted to do that, right? On your sheet pan?
Okay.
Yeah, you could do that. Okay, so we're going to put the squash in here. Cool. And then we're going to put our 28 ounce. So we got the 3 cups, roughly 3 cups of the mashed squash, 28 ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Again, we have this recipe for you. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is vegetable stock and miso. A little bit of miso paste gives us this really nice kind of umami flavor that kind of rounds out things in this soup, and it's really nice. And then after that, all kind of simmers. And you know, the good thing is you don't have to cook this for very long now because you know our squash is already roasted in the oven. We've got, you know, we've already sweated down all our aromatics and our onions. They're cooked. We put the stock in, we put the miso in, and it's just a matter of stirring it and bringing it all together and getting it hot. Then we hit it with the Immersion Blender and put the fresh herbs in. We're doing rosemary and thyme, okay? We're gonna get the stock and the miso in there. And while we're working on that, I'm gonna switch over to the sweet dumpling squash that we roasted in the oven. Can you see? It's just, you know what I did? I made a mistake, guys. Look, but it's going to be okay. You do have to, when you're doing this, I did cut a little, like I wanted to get my flat bottom and I cut a little far so I got a hole in there, but our stuffing is not going to be, it's not a runny stuffing, so it's going to be fine. Okay, so this is now, you know, kind of fully cooked. The stuffing that I made, I was describing to you, that's the vegetable stock. Yes, perfect, thank you. I made a stuffing. I don't have a recipe for you, but it really is just because it's the way I do it. You know, there isn't really a recipe that I have for it. I think that probably each and every one of you has your own favorite or a favorite or maybe 2 favorite holiday stuffings. Any of them would be appropriate, you know, filled into this squash bowl and popped back in the oven. We're going to top it just with a little bit of olive oil, maybe some butter if you want that, sprinkle of Parmesan cheese, and then put the whole thing in the oven, just about 325 to get it nice and piping hot, a little bit of color on the top, and then, you know, it's ready for the holiday table. And it's just a really nice, nice presentation. And what's lovely is that you can do pre-bake these the day before as well. So you don't have to do everything. Have your stuffing made in advance, and then just fill them and pop them in the oven, you know, like 30 minutes before you're serving at the holiday table. Okay. I just want to get my stock in here. So this is vegetable stock, which we make 2 or 3 times a week at the restaurant as the basis for all of our soups. It's always a vegetable stock from whatever veggie trimmings we have going on. And I'm going to stir this up and get it all nice and hot. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. This is my stuffing. I was telling you, our traditional family stuffing is cornbread with sauteed apples, onions, sometimes leeks as well. Sausage is important, and lots of fresh sage and parsley. And I just made it this time. I substituted quinoa instead of bread. And I'm just going to fill that with a nice little dome of stuffing. And then we'll pop that back in the oven. I think I'm just going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil on that and some salt and pepper. There we go. Parmesan cheese might be fine too. Let's do this. And that goes in the oven. And then it'll be ready to serve. And they're individual, which is kind of fun. Okay, so we'll see how that goes. Okay. You know, making a really nice base of aromatics. You know, I do, you know, sweat down the onions with some celery and apples. Of course, I like the crumbled sausage in there too. You can use pork, turkey sausage, and then the fresh herbs at the end. So you've got that all kind of, you know, all those ingredients kind of cooked down, but you still want a little texture like in your celery and your apple, and then mix it with your quinoa or your cornbread or whatever, you know, other bread you might want to use. Depending on how dry that is, of course, you got to add a little stock to moisten it up, a little bit of butter too, if you want it to taste rich, right?
Okay, all right.
But I think the important thing is to do it the day before, and then taste it, and get it to the texture and the flavor that you're happy with, right? The day before, because you don't want to be slaving over those things, you know, the day of. All right. And then once you get it where you want it, put it in a casserole, top it with a little bit more butter, olive oil, or Parmesan, or whatever you're doing to finish off the top, and bake it off, you know, 30 minutes before serving. So I'm always the proponent of making things in advance, because then you have a chance in your kitchen to calmly taste it, assess how much you like it, you know, and adjust it if you need to. Okay. So, okay, our soup is cooking. And it's smelling really good. Yeah, it smells really good. Okay, let's see. Oh, does anybody want to hear about the quinoa trick? Quinoa trick. So, if you have cooked quinoa before, you probably have cooked it in water on the stove, I would guess. If you haven't cooked it, it's really easy. And I think one of the great tricks that I've learned recently is actually oven baking the quinoa instead of cooking it on the stove, because you get a much nice, lighter, fluffier quinoa. So here's the scoop. Half cup of quinoa to 1 cup of hot water. And I can show this to you actually. Sorry, I'm doing this because we're okay on time, right, Marion?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. First thing, when you're doing quinoa, though, right, you always want to rinse it. And quinoa is tiny. It's a tiny little grain, right? So make sure you use a really fine mesh sieve, or else it's just going to go all over your sink. You're going to lose it all. So you want to rinse it before you cook it. Now I'm going to put it in just kind of a shallow oven-proof dish. That's my half cup of quinoa. I'm going to top it with a cup of hot water. One cup of hot water. Tablespoon of olive oil. And a little bit of salt. Okay. And then we're going to top it with, we're going to cover it with foil. Do we have any foil? Okay, we're covering this with foil, and we're putting it in the oven. And it's going to bake in the oven at 350 for about 20 minutes until that water is absorbed. Then you let it sit and fluff it. Now, when you're doing this, don't make the mistake of going to the oven with this little narrow tray with water because you're going to spill it. So I put that dish on another tray and then put it in the oven, okay? Okay. Something else in there. No. Okay. I'm stirring the soup, which is getting really yummy and almost ready for us to puree with immersion blender and then add our fresh herbs, which is kind of, whenever you're cooking with fresh herbs, it's always best to add them at the end, final stages, because you've got the volatile oils, the aromatics in those herbs, which get absolutely crushed with too much heat. So you want to kind of add them at the end. Okay. So we'll do that in a second. And just want to say thanks so much for you guys all tuning in tonight. And thanks so much to the Suppers contingent for really continuing to work so hard to kind of keep our health and wellness top of mind. You ladies and everybody on the board and the gentlemen do a wonderful job, and we're honored to be a part of it. And
well, thank you.
Honored that you have us here. So.
It's wonderful. I mean, that's what we know. We can't do this alone, so we need to just work together and just taste our way to a healthier, healthier self. Absolutely. So did you add the miso? So somebody was asking.
Did I add the miso? As a matter of fact, we forgot to add the miso. Did you find the miso in the water? Thank you for calling us out on missing the miso.
And do you have a favorite olive oil that you like to cook with?
You know what? I don't. I have to say I'm not a wine or an olive oil snob. I think that we do try to get something that's a little bit, middle of the road, not too heavy tasting. And I don't have we don't really have a favorite brand. Okay. We just try to use something that, just isn't too heavy. Basically. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
It is our favorite fat to cook with, for sure, olive oil. We use a lot of it.
Yeah.
Not the miso. I'm gonna find it. Okay, so I'm gonna let's do this. I'm gonna back up. I want to put the miso in our soup before we puree it. We're gonna stir our miso in. We're going to use the immersion blender then to puree our soup. All right. Thank you. Do that. Can you put that over there? So this is my, this is the immersion blender. I've probably had it for eons. It's a Braun immersion blender. And it works great because what it gives you the ability to puree things coarsely, whereas if you just chucked it in your blender, you don't have as much control over the texture, right? Plus, you don't have to dirty something else. I'm all about that. Okay, we'll pull this down here. Okay. So also pull the stick blender. Oh, Emil, could you pull that down a little bit further? Okay. so I can reach the soup. Okay. So I'm just going to puree this, not all the way because I like a little chunky texture. Very hot, which is good. We're also working in our miso at this point. Thank you. I think we're good. What would I do without my friends in the kitchen? I'm telling you. Okay. I'm going to add our chopped fresh rosemary and thyme. There's nothing better than, I think, loads of fresh herbs in a soup. Steam up my glasses. Oh, are you guys all coming over?
I know.
Yeah, it's looking really good. We'll pour some out in a second. Okay, so the pomegranate I wanted to show you because I think the pomegranate is a great accent if you're going to do a plate of the oven roasted delicata crescents that we made earlier, right? So just kind of put them on a shallow platter. So the way I like to cut a pomegranate, it's never easy. It's always a little bit of a mess, but just kind of try to cut in here and pull segments out. Yes, you can do the easy thing. I see they sell seeds too, but you know, it's not as much fun. It's like opening this up and like pulling out these delicious gems, which look beautiful, sprinkled on top of that roasted squash. And then I sprinkle just some fresh herbs, some chives and parsley, and you have a really beautiful dish for the holidays. For me? Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
So Kim, do you use the olive oil? Is it extra virgin or is it just regular?
Yeah, it's not. We generally don't cook with extra virgin.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We take a look at what that looks like. If we did a plate of the delicata, right? I'm going to do a little plate for you. And here we go. I know, can't tell, but anyway, just sprinkle with some fresh pomegranate seeds on top and some fresh herbs. And, you know, that's a really nice side dish for the holiday table. If you wanted to add a little bit of goat cheese, you could do that too, I suppose. I don't think it needs it. I love the pop and the citrusy flavor of the pomegranate seeds with the richness of the roasted squash. Is really delicious. Really good stuff. Okay. Our soup is ready, and I want you to see what it looks like. I don't know if it translates as well, but it has just a really nice kind of, you know, kind of rosy tinged orange cast to it. And smells delicious, and it tastes even better. So, any other questions about squash? You guys are amazing, and again, I thank you so much for joining us here in the kitchen. And we want to wish you all a very, very happy Thanksgiving. And I know that most of us will have smaller gatherings than usual, but still, it's a great time to celebrate and be thankful with some wonderful, healthy, nutritious food to share with your few family and friends that you might have. And I hope that you will experiment with lots of different types of winter squash this coming holiday season and through the winter, because it's just such a great source of of nutrients, and there's so many delicious ways to enjoy it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Kim. This has been wonderful. And I know that we now all feel better and empowered to manage our squash a little better and not so intimidated.
Yeah, remember, put it in the oven for 10 minutes at 350. And
right.
It's like a totally different ballgame.
All right. And as far as whatever herbs you want, like if you on your recipe is thyme and rosemary, but I'm assuming that you can use whatever kind of tickles your fancy.
Oh, yeah. In this soup, if you wanted to, if you like sage, you know, that could be nice too. I mean, I think you want to do kind of a hearty, savory herb in there because there's a lot of flavor that you have to fight against with the ginger and the garlic. And so, you know, like just putting parsley and chives in there might be pretty, but they'll probably be overpowered with flavor.
Okay. So, all right. And then to cut up for butternut squash, you do the same thing where you would soften it in the oven and then just cut it up, and that's the way you use it for your
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I hope that you have some ideas for the upcoming holidays and also to get us through this winter, which might be a long one, but when we have things to cook and make us feel better, it helps. So thank you, and we hope to see you soon. Keep cooking. And also go visit Jam and Crepes.
Come and visit us. We always have a fresh soup that we make from scratch with our own veggie stock. So a lot of people don't know that. We do all kinds of things besides just the crepes and the crepes that we make. We just have a really nice selection of savory fillings that are based on the local harvest, roasted vegetables, our house-made jams and pickles, very unusual combinations that you know, that we put together are unique to us. And we really are always looking to kind of celebrate and focus on what's fresh and local, because we do believe that the freshest fruits and veggies have the best flavor and the highest nutrient capacity as well. So we try to focus on the local harvest.
Absolutely delicious. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Marion and team and everybody.